CBS News 24/7. I'm Elizabeth Cook. Let's take a live look at the White House, where President Trump is gearing up to sign an executive order dismantling the Education Department. The White House says it won't be today, but CBS News sources tell us the president is working on it. And whiplash in the trade war, how Trump is rolling back tariffs on Mexico while Canada pulls American alcohol from its shelves. Plus, a military exercise goes horribly wrong the moment of an accidental bombing caught on camera in South Korea. And we're keeping an eye on the Dow right now as investors react to the news that President Trump is pausing some tariffs on some Mexican goods for 1 month. President Trump rocked the markets this week with his sweeping 25% tariffs on Mexico and Canada. President Trump announced a delay in a post to social media. Here it is. He writes in part, quote, "After speaking with President Claudia Sheinbaum of Mexico, I have agreed that Mexico will not be required to pay tariffs on anything that falls under the USMCA agreement. This agreement is until April 2nd. I did this as an accommodation and out of respect for President Sheinbaum." So let's bring in CBS News Chief White House correspondent Weijia Jiang. She is live at the White House for us. Weijia, another last-minute shift on tariffs from the president. Why the sudden turn? And this is not the first shift he's made. Does this signal more potential pauses?
Well, Liz, this came after the president spoke by phone to the Mexican president, Claudia Sheinbaum. And you're right that this isn't the first sort of movement that we have seen since his initial announcement on tariffs. I think it's important to note that unlike Canada, which slapped retaliatory tariffs on U.S. Products right away, Mexico waited perhaps to buy some time to see if an agreement could be reached in some way. And so at the least, this has bought them something that Canada doesn't have, which is a 1-month exemption, again, as negotiations continue. But the president is not only facing pressure from these other foreign leaders, there's also external pressures here at home, as an example. So after he had a call earlier this week with the big three U.S. automakers, yesterday we learned that he put a pause on automobiles for Canada and Mexico for 1 month, because obviously those American companies are worried about how it could disrupt their business and their business model as they're trying to change the supply chain a bit here. And so there has been movement, Liz, and we don't know exactly where this is going to land, but we do know the White House insists the president is still all in on tariffs.
And Weijia, we're also keeping an eye on the White House for a move that could completely overhaul the Education Department. What more do we know about that and the millions of students that this could potentially impact?
Well, we know that the president has made this a goal of his because just last month he said, "I'd like to close it immediately. It is a con job." And it's also a relatively small department, lives with just about 4,400 employees there. And I think what's important is to note what the Department of Education does and does not do. So the department is responsible for distributing federal financial aid for education. And the secretary, Linda McMahon, has already testified to say that that will just be removed to another agency, but it's still going to go out. It's not like money is going to stop flowing in terms of financial aid. They also collect and share research data about students, and they are charged with enforcing non-discrimination policies in schools. But when it comes to what your kids are going to learn, the federal department cannot dictate that. That is up to states to determine various curriculums. But I will say that that last part especially is what many people are worried about.
Sure.
The president of the largest teachers union, AFT, Randy Weingarten, issued a statement to say, this sends a message that the president doesn't care about opportunity for all kids. Maybe he cares about it for his own kids or his friends' kids or his donors' kids, but not all kids. So, Liz, we don't know exactly how this is all going to shake out. But again, what we do know is it is coming, and the president has made that abundantly clear.
And we're going to lean into this a little bit more later on in this show. CBS News Chief White House correspondent Weijia Jiang. Always great to see you, Weijia. Thanks so much. All right, let's turn our monitors now to Capitol Hill, where the fallout continues over the vote to censure Texas Congressman Al Green. The resolution was brought to the floor days after Green interrupted President Trump during his address to Congress on Tuesday. Take a listen to how that moment played out on the House floor earlier today.
Will Representative Green present himself to the well? By its adoption of House Resolution 189, the House has resolved that Representative Al Green be censured, that Representative Al Green forthwith present himself in the well of the House of Representatives for the pronouncement of censure, and that Representative Al Green be censured with public reading of this resolution by the Speaker.
You can hear Democrats there saying, "We will overcome," one of the anthems of the civil rights movement. In response to that resolution passing, Green repeatedly said he interrupted the president to remind him that he does not have a mandate to cut Medicaid. He also says he would do it again. CBS News congressional correspondent Caitlin Huey-Burns joins me now for more on all this. Can you walk us through that moment and what this means for Green and for the Democrats?
Yeah, quite a remarkable moment, and you actually had a handful of Democrats vote in favor of this censuring of their colleague, Al Green. Now, what this does, this is essentially just a public slap on the wrist for behavior. There's nothing binding about this. They aren't penalized further, but it is basically an embarrassment to the member, could cause some reputational damage. And you saw how they actually have him stand in the chamber and hear the censure being passed down to him. Now, you have lots of Democrats who are arguing that this is a infringement upon free speech, that other Republicans have interrupted Democratic presidents at addresses like these and haven't been penalized for it. But Republicans also wanted to send a message. And more broadly, this speaks to the way in which Democrats haven't really figured out how to go against this president in one cohesive, strategic way. Al Green really took it upon himself to use this avenue to interrupt the president. You had some Democrats who were uneasy about the way he did that and voted with Republicans to give him that public slap on the wrist.
Another major headline from Capitol Hill today, Caitlin, the government funding bill. Most Republicans say they are on board with Speaker Mike Johnson's plan. Does he even need Democrat support to get his continuing resolution through?
Well, remember, his majority is so fragile and narrow. We've seen this time and time again. And so if any Republicans, if even just a couple of them defect, he's going to need some support from Democrats. And so what the Speaker is proposing is what he is calling a clean continuing resolution, just extending current government funding levels through September to keep the government running. Remember, the government runs out of money next Friday. But you often have, time and again, a group of conservative House Republicans who don't like the level of government spending and don't want to further it, even if just temporarily. So a handful of them met with the president yesterday at the White House, and President Trump told them, look, just get this passed, get this out of the way, and you can have those big policy fights wanting to cut spending even further, accept some of those DOGE cuts, for example, in the budget, which is a separate item here that they're dealing with. Some members came away from that meeting buying that argument and saying that, okay, that sounds good, we can take that. But we're really looking at a few holdouts who want to see the text of the legislation, which is supposed to come out tonight or tomorrow morning, before they make a final decision. So there is a question of whether Dems cross the aisle and say, okay, we'll give you this. But by and large, Democrats are wanting to hold together and say, hey, you have the majority. You guys figure it out.
And speaking of the Democrats, one of the loudest voices in that party, Senate Minority Leader Chuck Schumer, he held a press conference to stress the importance of the Department of Education. And that's because, as we mentioned earlier in the show, the president says he's considering a complete dismantle of the agency. He talked about it on the campaign trail. We want to play some of that sound and talk on the other side.
This would be, if it happens, one of the most destructive and devastating steps that Donald Trump has ever taken. Who's going to be the victim? Americans' kids, America's school children. to get tax breaks for his billionaire friends and hurt our school children? I don't think that's what America wants. I don't think that's what America bought into.
Now, Caitlin, we have to mention that Congress still has to approve this. Can you tell us what would need to happen next once Trump signs this executive order?
Yeah, and this was a big line of questioning at Linda McMahon's confirmation hearing. Both Republicans and Democrats asked her, you know, you need Congress to agree to dismantle, to get rid of the Department of Education. And she said, oh, yes, we understand that. Here are the ways that we want to move some of the services over to other agencies. And you can really look at some of these other agencies, like the dismantling of USAID, as a roadmap for how the administration could go about this without needing the support from Congress. Because remember, to get rid of the Department of Education, as Trump wants to do, and by the way, he's not the first Republican to want this. This has been a long-standing push from the Republican Party, going back to Reagan at least. You would have to have 60 votes in the Senate to do that. That is just not possible, not going to get those votes. So what they seem to be doing, at least in the plans, the roadmap that Linda McMahon kind of laid out in the hearing, was that you move some critical services over to the Department of Health and Human Services, for example, or other agencies. What that looks like, how that's actually implemented, is a whole other story, and we could see, you know, consequences from that. The Department of Education is really responsible for things like Title I funding for disadvantaged, low-income schools, services for students with disabilities, but the bulk of the work in coming up with education plans, curriculum, how schools are run, how the curriculum is done, that is done at the local and state level already. And so this is a small agency already, and they are arguing that some of these critical services, Pell Grants, other loans, in addition, you know, have to be run through the Department of Education. So we'll see what this dismantling looks like, but there is a lot of support from Republicans on Capitol Hill to basically move it, dismantle it as much as they can.
Take it apart piece by piece. Caitlin Huey-Burns, thank you so much for joining us. All right, coming up, protesters at universities across the country making their voices heard. We'll take you to California, where the Justice Department opened an anti-Semitism investigation into the state's public university system. We're live at UC Berkeley when we come back. You're watching CBS News 24/7. Some universities continue to see protests over the Israel-Hamas war. In New York, pro-Palestinian protesters have been demonstrating at Barnard College a day after police broke up a sit-in because of a bomb threat. Police cuffed 10 people who refused orders. Barnard College said one of their employees was hurt during that sit-in.
We please need all occupants of the building to evacuate the building using the staircases.
All right, let's take you back to Wednesday's protest. Video from inside Barnard College Library shows us the moments everyone inside the building had to evacuate.
If you continue to use the bullhorn and officers here, you will be arrested for OTA.
And this was the scene outside that building as NYPD officers pushed protesters out of that area. In the end, authorities didn't find any explosives and cleared the scene. Now, amid that demonstration, a nearby pro-Israel protest questioned why school officials aren't acting harsher to students attending the pro-Palestinian protest. Right now, it's not clear if those arrested will be disciplined. All right, we're going to stay in New York for a moment. Students at Columbia University, which, by the way, is affiliated with Barnard College, now under investigation by a disciplinary committee over criticism of Israel. Dozens of students said they received notices for a range of activities, from social media to joining what officials call unauthorized protests. Free speech advocates are raising the alarms. They say the school is bowing to Trump's threat to pull federal funding from schools that allow these types of protests. All right, jumping the map now to California. Nearly a year ago, you remember, protesters created encampments on the University of California campuses to demand the UC system divest from doing business with Israel. And for weeks, daily life was interrupted, and Jewish students reported feeling afraid at school. Now, President Trump's Department of Justice is investigating the UC system over allegations of anti-Semitism against employees. CBS News Bay Area reporter Veronica Macias is live at UC Berkeley to break that investigation down for us. Welcome, Veronica. What is the Trump administration doing at Berkeley today?
Well, we know that representatives with the task force are expected to arrive here at UC Berkeley. The question, though, is when, Liz? And we know that students that we've talked to say, how can they forget about those demonstrations? They were large scale. And for the most part, 2023, 2024 brought peaceful demonstrations and protests here at UC Berkeley. There was one incident, though, in February of 2024 that comes into question, at least here at UC Berkeley, where a Jewish speaker was disrupted. Students there saw shattered glass. There was a broken window, and Jewish students at the event had to be evacuated. So the task force here could be zeroing in on this one incident, but the DOJ, the task force, they're going to be looking at a timeline of things. They're looking for a pattern of discrimination in this investigation. And so far, the university has come out saying that they have a response that is going to be comprehensive, looking at all allegations and incidents that were reported to the university. And also we know that, like you mentioned, free speech groups questioning here what's going to be investigating and saying that the elimination of any funding here is of concern to them. Remember, UC Berkeley, home to civil rights free speech movement. But overall, the bottom line here from administrators is that they have an unwavering support for the Jewish community, and total some 2,500 undergraduate students here at UC Berkeley, Liz.
Yeah, as you said, Veronica, you have to remember that Berkeley was the home for the free speech movement among protesters. We saw that in the 60s for sure. That's what Berkeley is really known for. I'm curious, have you spoken to professors or other people there in charge? How are they reacting to all of this?
Well, students themselves sort of reacting now to the news, saying that they remember seeing the demonstrations happening. I talked to one student. He doesn't really know much about the investigation, but he definitely knows that there was a mix of emotions, at least within students. Take a listen.
I know me personally, I have a lot of Jewish friends who have gone by Free Palestine protests and have felt kind of a weird mix of emotions, because they both want to be supportive of said movements, but also make sure that they're protecting themselves and making sure that they're staying safe. So I know that there's a lot of inner conflict there.
Now, leaders here at the university say they, again, don't know when representatives of the task force with the DOJ are going to be arriving, but they are prepared, and they're also prepared, they're saying, and telling students that they know that they have the right steps in place here when incidents and accusations, allegations of anti-Semitism occur here on campus, Liz.
CBS News Bay Area's Veronica Macias, thank you so much for that report. Meanwhile, the winter storm continues to slam the Northeast. Check out this video out of Calhoun County, Iowa. That's about 105 miles northwest of Des Moines. Blizzard conditions, near whiteout conditions there. And about an hour and a half west of that area, video to our monitor showing stranded vehicles in the city of Huxley, Iowa. State Patrol blamed the whiteout weather for dozens of car crashes this week. Just look how powerful that wind is there blowing. Part of that big rig appears to be ripping off completely because of those extreme conditions. And we're also seeing snowy scenes moving north to Minnesota as well. Some people in Minneapolis are skiing to work today. Wow, that's making the best out of a difficult situation there. Maybe the folks there in Minnesota are used to these conditions, but it's always interesting across the country to see that. I go, wow, okay, that's making it work.
I feel like that guy had the option to take the car, and he's like, you know what? No, someone out there has a camera, and I'm gonna get this.
I got to get my skiing in. This is my chance.
Yeah, honestly, maybe he just couldn't go on his run today, and he's like, this is the next best thing for exercise.
I like his attitude.
Yeah, well, we are tracking all those winter storms really closely, because as we head into the coming days, especially into the weekend forecast, this could be a very big inconvenience for millions of Americans. So we're gonna dive into that forecast right now, pulling the map up just below me and showing you the next 48 hours. That main system is officially offshore now of the East Coast. However, this is the next one that's bringing in heavy amounts of snow from the Rockies all the way over into states like we just mentioned, Minnesota, Iowa, stretching over into Chicago, Illinois, right around the corner as we head into our evening hours tonight, early morning hours tomorrow. We will see gusty winds, rain, snow mix. And here's what's happening for us just within the past 24 hours. It was cities and states like, let's say, Michigan, all the way over into Wisconsin, Wisconsin that got anywhere up to around 15 to 24 inches of snow within the past system alone. That was that huge winter storm that swept throughout the Northeast. It still is lingering this afternoon up into Maine, all the way over into Vermont and New Hampshire too. We can see some of that lingering snow close to the Canadian border, but this on the back end of that system is starting to pose a threat when it comes to wintry conditions across states like Wyoming, Nebraska, stretched all the way over into Iowa, and of course Illinois too. We head more south, Mississippi, Alabama. We're pretty much staying dry as we head into this weekend's forecast, which is great news, but that broken apart rain system will continue to sweep throughout the Midwest as we head into at least the next 24 hours. So we can see about 8 additional inches of snow with this system. We can also see about 3 inches of rain in some of those southern states, but we are not out of the clear just yet after that other winter storm swept in earlier this week.
They just keep, every single week, it's a new storm or a new system moving through.
It really is.
All right, Jess, thank you so much. Well, it was an exciting day for space travel. We'll have that exciting landing when we come back. Plus, the Trump administration promises to dismantle the Department of Education. We'll talk to a reporter with Wall Street Journal about what the department does and what its demise could mean for your child's education. You're watching CBS News 24/7. Welcome back to CBS News 24/7. We've been following those cuts from Elon Musk's Doge. Well, now they're expected to impact the Veterans Affairs Administration. CBS News obtained a letter outlining plans to slash more than 80,000 VA jobs by the end of the fiscal year. Now, in California, veterans protested outside the VA clinics in the San Francisco Bay Area. CBS News San Francisco reporter John Ramos spoke to veterans at a protest in Santa Rosa, where some say they feel betrayed after putting their lives on the line for our country.
Outside the VA hospital in Santa Rosa, it wasn't the usual crowd of protesters. Veterans, many of them from the Vietnam War, were feeling betrayed.
I thought it was pretty much hands-off veterans. You know, nobody wants to say I sponsored a bill to cut the veterans' benefits, but being Trump did it, all his lapdogs will do whatever he says.
There was plenty of anger about Donald Trump. Last week, nationwide, 1,000 VA workers were let go by Elon Musk's Doge, with another 1,400 in the last few days. They are the workers these people rely on for health care.
Be strong during this, and don't let fear take us over. We have to stay strong. We have to stay united.
Katie Weber is a disabled veteran who says many of the wounds suffered by Vietnam veterans are as much mental as they are physical.
We've already lost 2,400 people in 2 weeks. So we have a problem if we lose any more. If we lose these folks, we're done. You're going to see suicide like you never saw before.
But for former Marine Gunnery Sergeant George Sager, the betrayal feels personal. The Vietnam veteran voted for Donald Trump in 2016 because he thought it would shake things up and force the two parties to work together.
What I expected, that he would agitate both sides of the political spectrum, came to fruition. But
do you like the result of that?
No.
He's not the kind of guy you would expect to be at odds with a Republican president, but like most veterans, he considers his VA benefits to be part of a sacred obligation.
I made a contract with the U.S. government. I've held up my end of that contract to the best of my ability. The government is always trying to change that contract down to the smallest dollar amount that they possibly can.
And though it's something that seems hard to imagine, this warrior who fought for his country more than 50 years ago says he would be willing to do it again.
I'm willing to step forward if needed still today.
To do what?
To defend the country and the Constitution. But
physically?
If need be.
Do you think it's going to come to that?
I hope not.
Each of these veterans are in some way a casualty of war. Now they're wondering if they will soon become a casualty of DOGE.
And that was reporter John Ramos with CBS News Bay Area. President Trump gearing up to sign an executive order that calls for the dismantling of the Education Department. The White House says it won't be today, but CBS News sources tell us the president is working on it. And a reminder for our viewers, earlier this week, Education Secretary Linda McMahon foreshadowed the move in an email titled, "Our Department's Final Mission." In it, she said the restoration of the department will profoundly impact staff, budgets, and agency operations. So joining us live now is Matt Barnum, the K-12 education reporter for the Wall Street Journal. Matt, thanks so much for being with us. I want to bring this up because you broke the news that President Trump was expected to issue an executive order aimed at eliminating the Department of Education as soon as today, Thursday. Yeah. White House Press Secretary Caroline Leavitt called it, quote, fake news. You want to respond to that?
Well, sure. Yeah. Well, we were actually very careful in our language. What we reported was that Trump could sign this executive order as soon as today. A number of other outlets, including CBS, have independently confirmed that. So it's not especially surprising to me that they've changed the timing, which we always knew was possible. And we also reported that the executive order was in draft form and it could change.
All right, I just want to read that quote from your Wall Street Journal article there. President Trump expected to issue an executive order as soon as Thursday there, clarifying the language. But I want to go over what is it that the Department of Education actually does? What's its purpose?
Yeah, excellent question, because there's lots of discussion about this without fully understanding what it does. There's a lot of debate about whether what it does is good or worthwhile and effective, but what it does is in K-12 education, it sends money to schools for students with disabilities and low-income students. It also runs various smaller grant programs and funding streams, like for charter schools or teacher training. And in higher education, it runs the federal student loan program and offers grants to low-income students to attend college. In both areas, K-12 and higher ed, it enforces civil rights law that bans discrimination based on race, gender, or other protected classes. And it also collects data and funds research in education.
And Matt, there's a lot of parents, though, who are concerned that if the Department of Education is eliminated, that will only add to the issues so many public schools are facing: trouble retaining teachers, low literacy rates, lack of resources. Can you set the record straight, though? Does the Department of Education have any impact on the quality of education in our public schools?
That is sort of the billion or trillion dollar question for the total size of K-12 education spending. And that's sort of a political question, and people disagree about that. Some people think that the department has played an absolutely vital role in supporting schools. And even if it's not the biggest funder of education, in fact, it's a relatively small funder of K-12 education, it still plays an important role, these supporters say, of protecting disadvantaged students and protecting civil rights. Critics say it's not effective, and that, it adds too much paperwork and spreads what they would describe as woke ideas. So there's, debates about how effective it is.
So what's going to happen if we eliminate the department or dismantle it piece by piece? What happens to those Pell Grants, federal aid, and the programs for economically disadvantaged families and those children with disabilities? What happens if that's left up to the states? What does that look like?
We don't know exactly how this would play out, in part because the draft of the executive order that we obtained, which again, that could change, doesn't exactly spell out what it wants the Education Secretary to do. It just says within existing law, the Education Secretary, Linda McMahon, needs to do everything she can to facilitate the closure of the department. Now, within existing law is a very important caveat, because the department was created by Congress and most of its major programs were created by Congress. So President Trump and Linda McMahon cannot snap their fingers and close the department. Linda McMahon also said that the big programs like funding for students with disabilities would not go away, but they might move it elsewhere and try to make it more efficient. Now, it's not clear how moving it elsewhere would improve things or not. And it's also not clear if Congress would go along with any sort of move. The other option that they have, which they've already started doing, is sort of diminish the department from within, try to cut various programs, reduce staff. And again, they've already cut discretionary programs, smaller ones, and they've already done that to some extent. And they could continue trying to do that as a strategy of sort of diminishing it from within.
Wall Street Journal reporter Matt Barnum. Thank you so much, Matt, for being with us.
Thanks for having me. I appreciate it.
Well, it was an exciting day for space travel. 8 days after launch, a robotic lander named Athena made its final descent to the moon's surface and touched down on the moon just moments ago. Here's our very own Reed Cowan watching it in real time this last hour.
So we're going to stay on these pictures and let you continue listening to this. But we do also want to let you know we're covering the landing with a team of space experts. CBS News space consultant Bill Harwood, CBS News national correspondent Mark Strassman, and Intuitive Machines spokesperson and retired astronaut, by the way, not too shabby of a resume, Clayton Anderson. We're going to listen to your voices, gentlemen. Not too bad of a picture there coming to us on CBS News 24/7 from outer space. How significant is this landing, gentlemen?
And we are currently not seeing our place.
I'll jump in. You know, it's a very significant landing. I'll point out that what we're seeing on the screen is actually an animation. It's not actual photography yet. We expect pictures as soon as they get down on the surface or shortly thereafter. It's a very significant mission. It's showing that a commercial company can put payloads on the moon for NASA. They want to be able to carry, you know, customer payloads to the moon as a transportation service. That's a big goal of NASA's, to lower the cost of lunar exploration and collect data at the same time that'll help their Artemis program when they hope to put astronauts on the moon.
Pretty exciting stuff. Well, the company that made Athena, Intuitive Machines, said the lunar lander is on the moon and they are in communication with it, but it's still unclear what that communication is at this time. We'll be watching. Well, for the first time in 15 years, the U.S. is about to execute someone by firing squad. We'll dig into this case when we come back. Let's take you to South Carolina now, where a convicted murderer will be the first person executed by firing squad in recent history. This comes after a 2024 state Supreme Court ruling by execution by firing squad is not cruel and unusual punishment, as inmates can choose their method of execution. The other options are lethal injection or the electric chair. Brad Sigmund, who murdered his girlfriend's parents back in 2001, chose death by firing squad. His execution date is set for tomorrow. His lawyer asked the South Carolina Supreme Court to delay the execution and to give Sigmund time to reconsider the method, but the court rejected those efforts. Let's bring in CBS News Crime and Public Safety Unit Senior Coordinating Producer Anna Schechter. Thank you so much for being with us, Anna. Can you tell us a little bit more about this case and why he chose to have a firing squad execution? Sounds unusual.
It is unusual, Liz. In fact, this hasn't been very rarely used, but he chose it because, his lawyer told me just a couple of hours ago, because there have been so many problems with lethal injection in recent years. In fact, a couple of his close friends that he calls brothers who were on death row with him recently were executed by lethal injection, and it took at least 20 minutes for them to die. There have been a spate of issues with this around the country. In fact, it's the most botched method used in this day and age. It was, of course, introduced in the 1980s, viewed as a more humane way of carrying out executions. The other method, which was actually the default method currently in South Carolina, is the electric chair. But his lawyer cited issues with burning, mutilation that can come from that, and cited the age of the electric chair that is used in the state. And so he picked the least bad option according to the information presented to him. That's according to his lawyer. We have reached out to his former girlfriend, the daughter of the two people that he murdered and admitted to murdering. It was a brutal case back in 2001. We have not heard back from her, but she did tell USA Today that she wants him held accountable but does not agree with the death penalty. And I want to play a little bit of sound from his attorney from our conversation a bit earlier today, where he talks about the realities of choosing this method of execution. Let's take a listen.
He knows what the firing squad will do to his body. He knows it's going to break his bones. He knows it's going to pulverize his organs. And it's a measure of how impossible the choice was here because of all the information about lethal injection that was concealed, that he's chosen this.
So that was his lawyer, Bo King, and what he's talking about there about lethal injection and the information that's concealed is he and his client were not able to obtain details about how the poison that is administered during the lethal injection was kept, at what temperature, was it properly kept in a cold and secure environment. And so without that information, his lawyer says he chose the method that he was least afraid of, despite just how violent the method is, Liz.
Yeah, the details of these executions are grim there, Anna. Do any other states allow for execution by firing squad? How does it work?
Yes, there are 5 other states that do allow for it. Utah is the one that where it's been used most often. Almost all of the executions have occurred in Utah when they've been done by firing squad, but it is very rare when compared with the other methods like the electric chair and lethal injection. So this is very rare, and there's a lot of attention. And I wanted to bring up the state of Idaho because there's actually a bill going to the governor's desk where death by firing squad could be the sort of main default way of carrying out an execution in that state if that bill is signed. I think this is a reflection of all the problems that we've seen with lethal injection, and I think it raises the question as a society about, do we want to do this? The Trump administration has expressed its support for the death penalty in general, and it is available to prosecutors to seek in more states than it's not, in 27 states in the United States. So a very unsettling story to think about, and a reminder that execution is set for 6 p.m. tomorrow, and the governor can intervene. So it is up to the governor. He is the sole person who could step in and stop it tomorrow.
All right, Anna Schechter, thank you so much for that report. All right, let's take our monitors now overseas to South Korea for a huge mistake caused by some fighter jets. Get this, they accidentally dropped 8 bombs on a village. And here's the moment it happened, about 25 miles away from Seoul, near the border with North Korea, by the way. The Air Force says the bombs fell outside the shooting range during live fire exercises. We know 15 people were injured, 2 of them with serious injuries. You can also see the bombs damaged homes and even a church. The Air Force there says a committee will investigate the accident. Wow. All right, switching gears. The Loch Ness Monster has been spotted. You heard that right. We'll take you to Scotland and show you the evidence that experts are calling fantastic. You're watching CBS News 24/7. All right, let's take you to Canada now, where a major liquor store in Ontario pulled American alcohol off the shelves entirely. This is all in response to Trump's latest tariffs. The Liquor Control Board of Ontario is one of the largest buyers of alcohol in the world. CBS News correspondent Lana Zach went inside that liquor store and produced this piece along with our social team for TikTok. Take a look.
In all these store shelves, the American sections are completely empty. Canada is not taking these tariffs lying down. You want a sign that it's really serious? Don't screw with alcohol, because in addition to the 25% counter tariffs that Prime Minister Trudeau has announced on billions of dollars on American imports, there's also unilateral action that's being taken here in Canada. For example, at the LCBO, the Liquor Control Board of Ontario, they have pledged that they will not sell any American alcohol until the United States decides to end this trade war. And that amounts to $1 billion annually. In fact, the LCBO is one of the biggest single consumers of American alcohol.
It's a great report. Our social team has so much great content like that. This is on our TikTok and Instagram page. So please follow us at CBS News for more great reports like you just saw. All right, let's take a live look now at Minneapolis. The Northeast is being slammed by storms. Let's bring in Jessica Birch. Jess, a lot of folks are having to dig out just to get around town today. We even saw some folks skiing to work. They're just getting slammed with this storm.
I know. To see people skiing into work makes me think a couple things. What's wrong with your car? Is everything okay? Do you need help? I can drive you. But no, in all honesty, it has been snowy. It's been wintry. We've been dealing with gusty winds, a heavy mix of snow and rain all throughout these states up north. So I'm going to dive into what's happening for us as we head into the afternoon hours today and into the next 24 hours, because we have another winter storm around the corner sweeping from the Rockies over into the Midwest right behind me. You see that system bringing in plenty of rain and snow to areas like Chicago, but this originates from the Rockies as it continues to sweep across Kansas and Nebraska, bringing in chilly, breezy, and crazy weather right behind me. I want to show you just within the past 24 hours, we actually saw over 24 inches of snowfall in states like Michigan, 15 inches all the way over into Wisconsin. And that was just from the past winter storm that swept through that now is up into the Northeast. It continues to bring in snow to the Great Lakes, and that lake effect snow will continue to be a big trend for upstate New York. But it's hard not to take a look just a little bit backwards and see areas like Park City all the way over into Denver and stretching across Iowa and Nebraska. Heavy amounts of snow are expected as we head into our Friday morning forecast, lasting into Friday afternoon. And as it breaks apart over states like West Virginia all the way up into Pennsylvania, we'll see a mix of rain and snow widespread throughout these states. So in total, we could get up to around 8 inches of snow locally from this system just as we head into the next 48 hours. You take a look at the rainfall totals, well, we could see anywhere up to around 3 inches as it moves its way over just along that east coast. Back to you.
Jess, thank you so much. All right, North Korea closing its doors to travelers just weeks after allowing the first Western tourists to enter the country in 5 years. North Korea halted tourism at the start of the pandemic. Then it opened up its doors to Russian visitors last year, but it wasn't until last month that Western tourists could travel there. Those first Western tourists arrived last month in a northern city with no phone signal or internet access. Tour companies now tell travelers planning upcoming trips to hold off on booking flights. No word from North Korea yet on why it is halting tourism. All right, check out this video now to our monitors of a rescue in California's San Jacinto Mountains, just east of LA. 2 hikers were stranded for 3 days after falling 800 feet down a cliffside. Take a look.
Yep, start climbing.
Wow, rescue efforts began on Saturday, but rugged terrain and harsh winds caused some issues. And on Tuesday, rescuers hoisted them up and took the hikers to the hospital. Take a listen to the hikers describing what was going through their minds while they were just trying to survive.
Being together and just being huddled and having each other's, reassurance, I think really helped with the willpower and determination to just keep it going. If I can hear Chris's breath, I'm I need to also keep it together, and we're going to just get through the night.
Unbelievable how she was able to stay so calm. Both hikers, as you saw, they're severely hurt, but they say they are grateful they'll be able to recover. And now this, like the legend of Bigfoot, the Loch Ness Monster's mythical presence has captivated the world's attention. And it all started with this famous shot from 1934, which we now know was a hoax. Well, more than 90 years later, though, a new photo fuels this mystery of the Scottish lake. Officials at a museum dedicated to Loch Ness say this is the first potential sighting of the beast this year. What do you think? You think you can see kind of the slithery image there. The Loch Ness Center says a witness saw what appeared to be a big black mass under lake waters near a beach. They added this is a particularly captivating photo because the conditions of that moment were ideal for spotting any kind of Nessie activity there. However, the mystery still remains. What do you think, though? Do you think that's a Loch Ness Monster? I don't know. I like to believe it is. All right, let's take a live look at the White House now. We've been following potential changes that could dismantle the Department of Education and whiplash over tariffs. We'll have it all on CBS News 24/7.